أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على ما لا نبي بعده سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهداه إلى يوم الدين فإن خير الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. أما بعد, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome to the house of dua. And of course, welcome to our continuing conversation in our series titled The Right Way to Worship. The series from which we remind ourselves of some of the basic things we need to know in our worship. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, in today's presentation, we are coming to you with a very important topic, and that is Salat timings. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, if I were to ask you a basic question, wherever part of the world you live, what time is Salatul Dhuhr in your area? I'm sure many of you will be quick to say 2 o'clock. Others will be able to say 12:45. Some will say 1:30. And some may go as far as saying 2:30. This is not surprising, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam. You know why? Because we all live in different time zones. There is no universal time zone in the world. Therefore, we are expected to pray according to the time in our various local circumstances. For example, if Saudi Arabia were to observe their Salatul Dhuhr at 12:45, you do not expect that the United States will pray the same Salat immediately at that time, because it is not yet 12:45 in the United States. The United States will have to wait for another 8 to 12 hours in order to observe Salatul Dhuhr when it is 12:45 in their time. So there is no one single time applicable to the entire world. If Allah had wanted us to pray at the same time all over the world, of course, He was capable of doing so. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَجَعَلَ النَّاسَ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. If it were the wish of Allah, He would have made the entire mankind one. Maybe one religion, one geographical zone, maybe one kind of way of worship. He had the power to do that, but He decided not to do so. He dispersed us to different parts of the world so that we will discover the uniqueness in ourselves, so that we'll be able to understand the beauty of the creation. Another reason why we have this time variation in our timing of Salat is our own different interpretation of the Hadith and the verses of the Quran relating to this subject. We are not supposed to have variations about the meaning and the tradition left behind by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But you know the world in which we live, everyone wants to claim that it's on the right path. So, we cannot avoid having some variations or differences in the time we pray our daily salawat. One thing that needs to be pointed out is, even if we were to accept that Salatul Dhuhr is 2 o'clock in your time or 1 o'clock in my time, as the case may be, again, that is correct to some extent, but not entirely correct. Not entirely correct in the sense that the revelations and the tradition regarding timing in Salat were not passed down to us with specific time references. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the revelations regarding Salat asks us to observe Salat at different periods. Kitaba mawquta, at different periods. That's what we are commanded to do. And that's why the prophets took the pain to delineate the beginning and the end of time with regards to each prayer. We shall come to that very soon. This variation in timing has gotten even more complicated, especially in the Western world and other countries, where people take it upon themselves to adjust the time, what they call daylight savings. You know very well that the weather conditions in winter are not the same as weather conditions in summer. The nights are longer during winter than the day, while the days are longer during summer than winter. Therefore, adjustment of time from time to time is likely going to affect the way we worship and time ourselves for the worship. That's why we have a great deal of difference between those who do not adjust time and those who adjust time when it comes to Salatul Dhuhr, Salatul Asr, and even Salatul Maghrib. But this is an area where we have to be careful. Indeed, science and technology is helpful. It's helpful to us nowadays in determining our own time references. But science and technology is just a means to an end and not an end in itself. The end itself is Islam. Science and technology was made for Islam and not Islam made for science and technology. We have to be careful about this, not to allow ourselves to use science and technology, create some confusion with respect to the tradition laid down by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the commandment passed down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarding salat time. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, today, however, we are trying to shed light on this subject so that all of us will know exactly where we belong and what we are doing, so that if we are making mistakes, we correct those mistakes. It's very possible nowadays that even in the same country and in the same city, you see differentiation in timing between one masjid and the other. All of them claiming to be doing the same thing. So who is right and who is wrong? It's not supposed to be so. That is why we have decided to raise this issue to a level of discussion so that we can understand exactly what we are supposed to do. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, before we proceed, let me make references to verses in the Quran. Surah Al-Baqarah, for example, Surah An-Nisa, Surah Hud, Surah Al-Isra, and Surah Taha. In these different surahs, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declared, Ba'da a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Hafizu ala salawati wa salatil wusta wa qumu lillahi qanitin. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Faiza kadaytumu salat Fazkurullah qiyaman wa qu'udan wa ala junubikum wa idha atmanantum wa aqimu salat inna salata kanat 'alal mu'minina kitaban mawquta. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wa aqimi salata tarafay nahar wa zulafa min al-layl innal hasanati yuzhibuna sayyi'at zalika zikra lil-zakirin. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Aqimi salata liduluki shamsi ila ghasaqil layl wa qur'anal fajr. Inna Qur'ana al-fajr kana mashhuda. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Fasbir ala ma yaqulun wasabbih bihamdi rabbik qabla tulu'i shamsi wa qabla ghurubiha wa min ana'il layli fasabbih wa atrafan nahar la'allaka tarda. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, those are verses from Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah An-Nisa, Surah Hud, Surah Al-Isra, and Surah Taha. These verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the common thing about these verses is that they all speak about our salat time, the different parts of the day that we are supposed to observe the daily salawat. From these verses, we now learn the timing of the salawat are spread across night and day. It's neither limited to the day nor limited to the night. That is how it's supposed to be, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam. So you cannot find a situation or an ayah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that Salat Duhur is going to be 2 o'clock, or Salat to Asr is going to be 4 o'clock, or Salat to Isha is going to be 8 o'clock. No. You will also not find that in the tradition of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. What you will find are different periods mentioned during which these salawat become due. That's what we are supposed to observe. What is the right time for Salat, therefore? My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, we have 2 aspects of Salat timing. We have what we call Waqtul Ikhtiyar, which is the preferred time or the due time or the prime time of Salat. And we have what we call Waqtul Darur, which is what we call, the excused time of that Salat, or the extended time of that Salat, or the upper limit of that Salat in terms of time. But before we come into how these 2 timings operate side by side, let me give you a kind of analogy that will drive the point home. I know many of us like soccer. When we are playing soccer, in every soccer, we are supposed to get a winner at the end of 90 minutes. But if it's a game that must necessarily produce a winner, then we might have to extend that time to an extra time of 30 minutes with 15 minutes of both sides, plus some time for some penalty kicks. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, what we're about to discuss is something similar. We have what we call regulated time, the prime time for the Salat, and the extended time of the Salat, just as we see in soccer. Although this analogy is not exactly the same, but it will help to explain what I'm trying to say. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, observe the salawat from the beginning of the day to far into the night or the end of the night. So what are the periods for this salawat? The reason why this clarification is necessary is that some of us do feel guilty, especially when we miss the salat in Jama'ah, or we are not able to render it as and when due. We feel so guilty. Some get hopeless about it. I have good news for you. You don't have to be hopeless. If you know the timing in Salat, you don't necessarily have to be hopeless. Because there's a beautiful hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu that the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam says, if you are not able to render the Salat at its prime time, that is when it falls due immediately, you are allowed to render it at the extended time, even if it's only 1 rakah you are able to observe at the extended time before the extended time is over, you are still considered to be somebody who has rendered his Salat as and when due. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, the implication of this hadith is a mercy shown to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it's not a good measure of a Muslim to continuously delay his Salat to the extended period of the time. It is best for a Muslim to render a Salat at the prime time, at the virtuous time, that is, when it falls due immediately. So those of you who want to delay your Salat from its prime time to its extended time, you are taking a big risk. It's an indication of weak Iman. But if it happens once in a while, you are not able to render your Salat at the prime time and you now decide to do it at the later time of it, you are still as good as somebody who did the Salat at the right time. But remember, those who did it at the right time, for example, Salatul Fajr, they wake up in that very sleep-happy hour of the night to pray, and you come and pray it later, you are not likely to get the same result in terms of reward. But you will still be considered as somebody who has rendered a Salat at the due time. So, with this at the back of my mind, I want to now lead us to a discussion of what the timings are. As I said, there is no portion of the Quran or the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam in which the salat is reduced to either 2 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, as the case may be. There was no timepiece in the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. According to the hadith narrated by Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, he stated that Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam explained the different periods of the different salawat, reminding them of the prime period and the extended period. According to the hadith, the Prophet stated that the prime period for Salatul Dhuhr begins from Zawal, that is, when the sun tilts away from the meridian, from above the head. As soon as it tilts away, Salatul Dhuhr is due. At that time, when it tilts away, you will agree with me, it's not even yet 2 o'clock. But the prime time remains until the shadow of an object is equal to the length of that object. If you are the object, as the case may be, Salatul Dhuhr, the prime time remains until your shadow, as shown on the ground, is equivalent to your own height, creating a situation that looks like an obtuse side of a triangle. The obtuse side of a triangle, that is a triangle that has one of its angles over 90 degrees, is such that when you stand, the shadow of yourself goes straight. If you draw a line from the head of your shadow over there to your head, you are creating an obtuse side of a triangle. That's the end of the prime time of Salatul Dhuhr. And that time, if you look at it closely, it corresponds to 2 o'clock. And that's why most people want to do Salatul Dhuhr at 2 o'clock. But that's not to say 2 o'clock is exactly Salatul Dhuhr. Salatul Dhuhr actually begins from maybe 5 or 10 minutes after Zawal. As soon as the sun tilts towards the western side of the atmosphere, creating the shadow to move towards the eastern side of the atmosphere, then of course, it's time for Salatul Dhuhr. Salatul Dhuhr has an extended time, and that time begins from the time when the length of the shadow is equivalent to the length of the object up till the time when the sunshine begins to grow pale. That's what Salatul Dhuhr is. And some commentators also say that the time lasts up to the disappearance of the sun from the sky. What about Salatul Asr? Salatul Asr, according to the hadith, begins from the time when the shadow and the objects are equal in length up to when the sun is beginning to pale or turn yellow. And, the extended time of that Salatul Asr lasts up to the disappearance of the sun from the sky. When it comes to Salatul Maghrib, the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam says it begins when the sun disappears from the sky, leaving behind some reddish or dark yellow substances in the sky that look like clouds. As soon as those red substances appear in the sky, Salatul Maghrib is due. And Salatul Maghrib lasts until the time it takes to finish the Salat. It has no long time of extension. And so the earlier we do it, the better. But the extension of Salatul Maghrib lasts up to the break of dawn at the early hours of the next day. Then Salatul Isha, its prime time begins when those reddish things in the sky disappear and darkness is setting in immediately. That is the commencement of Salatul Isha, and it lasts up to the end of the first third of the night, which is around 10 to 11 o'clock in the night. But the extended time of Salatul Isha goes up to the time of the dawn, after the occurrence of the star of Al-Fajr. And when it comes to Salatul Fajr itself, its prime time begins from the dawn, the appearance of the dawn, immediately after the occurrence of the star of Al-Fajr. And the prime time lasts up to the break of dawn, when daylight is beginning to be noticeable a little bit. And this extended time goes up to the time of Ishraq, that is when the sun rises. This is the way the Prophet explained it. According to the hadith narrated by Jarir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu, it was reported that Jibril alayhi salam visited the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam for 2 days, teaching him these time frames for our daily salawat. The first time he came and prayed with the Prophet at the prime times. For Salatul Dhuhr at the time of Zawal, that is, before the shadow and the object were equal in length. Thereafter he came again and prayed with him for the same salat at the time the sun was now getting a little bit pale. In other words, at the end of the prime time of Salatul Asr. Then for Salatul Asr, Jibril alayhi salam came again and prayed with the Prophet at the prime time, which was the commencement of the time when the shadow and the object are equal in length. And then he left and came back again and prayed with him at the later time of Salatul Asr, which is at the pale time when the sky was beginning to turn yellow. He came again for Salatul Maghrib and prayed exactly at the time the sun disappeared from the sky, leaving behind the reddish substances. And when he came again for the second time, he prayed at that same time, signifying that Salatul Maghrib has no extended time. But for Isha, he came at the prime time when the darkness was about to come in as soon as the reddish things disappeared from the sky. And then came again later on, at the end of the first third of the night. And for Salatul Fajr, Jibril alayhi salam came again praying with the Prophet at the time of dawn, immediately after the appearance of the star of Al-Fajr. And then later on came again to pray with the Prophet, at the time of daybreak. In other words, between the dawn and the daybreak itself. So this is the way the timing goes. It's important for us to pay attention to this when we are praying. Therefore, if you are not able to observe your Salatul Dhuhr, for example, at the time of Zawal or immediately after Zawal, you are still free to observe the same Salat even up to the time when the yellowish things appear in the sky. It's still possible. The only thing is that you are now doing it at the extended time. And if you manage to do it at the extended time, even if it's 1 rakah you are able to do before that time is over and you complete your salah thereafter, you are still in order. So those of us who feel guilty because we have just missed Jama'ah should not beat yourself against the wall for too long, because Allah is merciful. But what is important is for us not to continuously push our salat from the prime time to the extended time. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, from time to time we miss our prime time, or we even miss the extended time. So for those of you who have missed your salat, when you want to pay back, there are certain rules and regulations that you want to follow. It's very important for you to understand that when you miss, for example, any salat, you didn't render it now, even if it's 20 years later, you remember that you forgot to render that salat, you are still liable to pay back that salat. Take note of that. And when you are paying back your salat or making up the salat that you have missed, you have to pay attention and render them in the way you have missed them. If you miss Salatul Dhuhr and Salatul Asr and you want to pay back, then you have to pray Salatul Dhuhr first before Salatul Asr. Unless you have missed so many salawat, if there are 5 or more, then you have to pray the salat that is due, that is current, before you come back to pray the other salawat you miss, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And especially when you are afraid that if you don't pray the salat that is due, you are likely to miss that same prime time or the due time of that salat. So it's permissible for you to, do the salat that is due first before you come to render all the other salawat. Otherwise, if you miss up to 3 or 4 salawat, you are expected to render them back in the order in which you missed them. What about a situation in which, you are following an imam, which is what many people do nowadays. They come to the masjid to follow an imam because they have just missed their Salatul Dhuhr. They immediately begin to do Salatul Dhuhr before joining the Jama'ah. Some even go as far as to do supererogatory salawat, optional salawat before they join the Jama'ah. That is absolutely wrong. If you mix salat in Jama'ah in progress, even if you own an obligatory salat before, it's more advisable for you to follow salat to Jama'ah. As soon as that salat is over, you now pay back, you now do your salat that you missed, but still repeat what you did with the imam. Let me make that abundantly clear. You miss Salatul Dhuhr. You come in when Salatul Asr is in progress. Follow the Jama'ah, follow the Imam, and pray Salatul Asr. As soon as the Salah is over, you can now come back on your own and pray Salatul Dhuhr and then Salatul Asr. In other words, you have to repeat the Salah that you did behind the Imam. The advantage of it is that you have already gained the blessing of praying behind the Imam in Jama'ah, as well as rendering your Salat in time. Very important, my dear brothers and sisters in Islam. For those of you who will come to the masjid and start rendering Nawafil Salat before you join Imam, it's absolutely wrong. If you miss an obligatory Salat, as soon as you get to know about it, it is the obligatory Salat you have to render first. In some cases, we miss our obligatory Salat while we are sleeping. But as soon as you wake up, it is the obligatory Salat you have to render first. I know of some people, they miss Salatul Fajr at the time it is due. Once they wake up, they start with Raka'atan in Fajr before they do the exact Salatul Fajr. That is wrong. You have to go straight to do your Salatul Fajr. The time for Raka'atan in Fajr is over. And you are not allowed to do any Salat until after Ishraq, after the sun has risen. The only time you can do Salat is between Ishraq and Zawal, either Salatul Duha or any other Nawafil that you want to do. Let us now quickly advise ourselves that the best way to avoid all these complications is for you to go to the masjid all the time to do your Salat in Jama'ah, and or to do your Salat in Jama'ah at home at the right time. If you adopt it as a system, then even your body will be telling you, without clock, without anything, your body will be telling you that it's time for Salah. So let's try as much as possible to do so, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna salata kanat alil mu'minina kitaban mawquta. Salah is prescribed for believers at definite times. At definite times. Now remember that everything created by Allah has its definite time. The sun moves within the time established for it by Allah. So also is the moon. So are the winds. So are the, any other creature established by Allah has its time. We are not an exception. Neither are we allowed to substitute the time given to us by Allah with other stuff, thereby giving excuses why we cannot render our Salah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our worship, take shaitan away from our lives, take our life far away from the shaitan. Subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Alhamdulillah.